Okay, we're going to roll right into our morning keynote. Really excited to have Controller Betty Yee here with us this morning. I got to meet Controller Yee for the first time earlier this year. I'm also part of all CEOs that do what I do across the state are part of this, what we call a REAL coalition, regional economic something. But it's a great group of people, and I always learn a lot from them. And we do this trip every spring to Sacramento to meet with legislators and other VIPs in Sacramento. And this time, I got to meet Betty Yee for the first time. And she's amazing, brilliant, and always has some really good insights to share about what's happening at the state level. And I thought, especially since the session just ended, that would be good to hear from the state perspective and how that relates to the good work that we're all doing here in this region and what the impacts might be. So without further ado, welcome Controller Betty Yee to the stage.
Great to see you. Thank you so much. It's okay to speak from the podium?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I don't have anything. Good morning, everyone. It is really a pleasure to join you at your 5th annual State of the Region. And first of all, let me just say I really appreciated Josh's presentation because in my prior life, I actually worked as a staff member in the California State Legislature for then Assemblymember Sam Farr and then Senator Henry Mello, and worked on the authorizing legislation for the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. So it's really wonderful to see the progress that's taken place. And Fort Ord has a special place in my heart because my father was a veteran of the United States Army, found a home here in Fort Ord. And I remember his experience coming out of the Army that I will never forget. He says, the best apples come from Watsonville. So what I wanted to do today is just give you a little bit of the state of the state, and I have to say we are really, I think, on watch by the rest of this country, certainly the rest of the world with respect to how we are continuing to grow and prosper economically, but also with respect to how we're going to deal with some of our challenges. And so let me just speak with respect to my role as controller. Certainly as the CFO of the state of California, I take very seriously that we are all working together to continue to grow our economy. We are the 5th largest economy in the world as we speak today. But we also, as you know, are home to the highest effective rate of poverty in the United States. And a lot of that has to do with the affordability crisis that knows no geographic bounds today in California. And much of the work and I just need to applaud Kate because not only in terms of her leadership here with MBEP, but also co-chairing the California Economic Summit, and her leadership and voice statewide and what her continuing advocacy will mean in terms of how we resolve some of these big issues. So I have a lot of green eye shade duties that I'm just going to run through very quickly in terms of the state of our economy, but also want to talk about just some policy issues that are going to be front and center for our state legislature and certainly for all of us as state policymakers. We really have our financial situation is something that's unprecedented. We have historic budget reserves. Our total revenues that are coming in for the fiscal year that started July 1st are already about $1.2 billion above the estimates contained in the governor's signed budget. And our personal income taxes, sales and use tax, corporation taxes are all coming in exceeding projections. And so this just continues to show the strength of our economy. Job growth also continues, but at a slower but steady pace. And so we mark really our next downturn by how we are doing on the job front. Our unemployment rate fell to a new record low of 4% for September, and we added just about 21,000 jobs statewide during that month. Now, this marks the 115th consecutive month of job growth, surpassing the long expansion of the 1960s. Unprecedented. And so, no surprise, California led the national recovery after the Great Recession, adding more than 3 million jobs right here in California. The UCLA Anderson forecast anticipates our unemployment rate will rise to about 5.1% by the 4th quarter of 2020, and this is due in large part to slow national growth and a weak housing market. But this is still less than half of our recession-era high of 12.2%. We all remember those years in 2010, but on par with the pre-recession unemployment numbers. So we've just steadily begun to make up for the losses during that recession period. The forecast continues to stop short of predicting a recession. So I know history teaches us that we are long overdue for some sort of economic downturn. There's been a lot of national coverage about whether it's going to be a downturn, a recession. Certainly here in California, as a global economy, we look very, very acutely at what's happening around the world in global markets, certainly in terms of our trade partners. And I think when we are looking at the particular economic health that we've been experiencing in the recent past, we do believe that we're headed towards a downturn and not a recession. Now, this time we have actually positioned ourselves to really weather the downturn, I believe, in a very, very responsible way. We've bolstered our state reserves, the rainy day fund, which the voters saw fit for us to begin to keep socking away. That one-time revenue from capital gains is due to be about $16.5 billion at the end of the current fiscal year. We have community and government leaders, including all of you, looking at striking a balance to provide money for services and helping those who are falling behind, at risk of falling behind, and then pursuing policies that could harm future development. So we're kind of trying to look at the present and the future at the same time, planning for that, and I think that is really what the leadership and all of you working in partnership are trying to do. Now, what I will say is that housing remains at the forefront of California's priorities, and it is our greatest conundrum, our greatest challenge. It is what will continue to be an economic drag even when we recover from the next downturn, and so we have a lot of work to do in that regard. Our workers are hard-pressed to find affordable housing in proximity to well-paying jobs and good schools. The Nonpartisan Legislative Analyst's Office says that we need to build about 100,000 to 140,000 units per year than we currently do, and mostly in coastal communities, to catch up with the demand for affordable housing. And we know that housing permits have been very weak throughout California. Housing in the three-county Monterey Bay Area, you know this, is expensive. Kate talked about a $2,500 cost of market rate housing for an average family. And even this can sound like a bargain compared to some who are familiar with housing prices in other parts of the state. But it puts affordable housing out of reach for many, many Californians. And we know that many are moving from our coastal communities inland, so our inland counties as well are starting to feel the pressure of the price of housing. So, as you are out in the community, I'm sure that you are seeing the effects that high housing costs are causing. And I will say it is true today that there is no area that is immune from the growing crisis of our homelessness population and housing insecurity. And so this is very front and center for the state. I am heartened to share with you that the 2019-20 fiscal year budget signed by the governor includes more than $1 billion to address homelessness, including $650 million in emergency aid for cities and counties and regional homelessness prevention agencies. So we know it's not a one-size-fits-all solution, and so we want to be sure that we are providing as much flexibility for the local regions to respond to the issue. The benefits of living in the Bay Area extend beyond California's borders. We know that we've got to keep this engine of innovation going in California, including down in this Monterey Bay region. And so addressing the state's housing needs is very much a part of how we are going to be sure that continues to be possible. We know that also there are notable shifts in the state's demographics. Last year, California had the slowest population growth in recorded history. So the affordability issues are actually having Californians contemplating more and more leaving the state. If the status quo continues, we may face a future without the diverse workforce that fuels the economic success that we have been experiencing. So something that we do take very seriously when we look at the demographic changes and what our future workforce could look like. So we do have a bit of time. The downturn is expected to probably take place within the next year and a half. And our economic growth has to include addressing our housing challenges. And the costs will be even exacerbated when we face that downturn in terms of the ability to continue housing construction. When we look at potentially workers being furloughed or laid off, we know that resources will be constrained even more for many Californians. So typically the state's role has been limited to subsidizing affordable housing projects and offering local governments tools to spur development, but these measures have not been enough to tackle the issue. And so the Governor Newsom's budget also includes $250 million to help cities and counties plan for new housing and $500 million for developer loans to build affordable housing. Another $500 million will expand the state's low-income housing tax credit, which is California's largest housing production program. And I am happy to have the opportunity to serve on the tax credit allocation committee, which will be allocating these credits to our developer community. The program supported less than 18,000 units in each of the last 5 years. So on the order of magnitude, we're talking the tens of thousands. The need is in the hundreds of thousands. So we have a lot of work to do. As California's CFO, I do really see the lack of affordable housing as a real and immediate crisis facing our economy, and as well as the livelihoods of millions of individual Californians. So we need aggressive actions. We have resources. All told, we have about $1.3 billion in tax credits and budget appropriations and bond proceeds that are being directed to this crisis of housing affordability and homelessness. I just penned an op-ed earlier this week in the Sacramento Bee that says the state can do more. We need to do more in terms of helping to drive costs down and looking at cost containment and the cost of building housing. And the recommendation I made was to begin to streamline all of the state's housing agencies. We have 6 primary housing agencies with the state of California. So when a developer has to do business with the state of California, 6 different set of criteria, 6 different sets of requirements to meet, and we can do better in terms of helping to drive those costs down. So this is really an area where I know that with one housing department, we hope that we can facilitate and really accelerate the construction of housing units that we are going to need. The other issue that I wanted to just flag, because I was just here a week ago with Middlebury Institute to talk about the development of a blue economy and an ocean economy. And as we talk about the risks that are certainly facing us with respect to our economy today, and which is why I really appreciated Josh's presentation, there are so many opportunities. And really, when we talk about looking at this particular region and all of the regions in the state of California, what I think we can feel very proud of is that within every region, whether you're in the North State portion of the state, whether you're down in Imperial County, right here in the Monterey Bay region, the Central Valley, each of these regions have attributes that we can capitalize on. And I will say that it could be the physical capital, it could be the human capital, but when we look at how we are going to respond to many of these issues in California, we have to take a statewide approach. And so the local innovation is really to hopefully be the laboratory of what we can look at replicating in other parts of the state, but really bringing in the attributes and strengths of each of the regions with respect to the human capital, the economic sectors, and certainly the physical attributes of those regions. So as I said, housing is front and center. You're going to see a lot more housing legislation being introduced next year, and hopefully be able to make some good headway there. But in addition to housing as a statewide of statewide importance, we know that we also have a tax system that is driving many away from California as well. We rely very heavily on the personal income tax, and this makes up about 70% of the state's general fund, so we have a highly volatile revenue system that when we do see the next downturn, we are going to see a pretty significant decline in revenue, although we do have, as I said, historic high budget reserves that will help us weather that. But these are common obstacles that we hear throughout the state in terms of what is really helping, what is hindering economic growth. So not only do they include high housing costs, but also business tax equity, income disparity, the work with governmental institutions, how responsive we are to innovation and change, and hopefully new economic activity. So these are the challenges I think when we work together and when we work in partnership we can overcome, because we really all are after the same goal, and that is the goal of shared prosperity, understanding that when we can create economic opportunity for all that and leave no one behind, that is how we can really enrich what this region has to offer. Now, I was recently fortunate to be selected by Governor Newsom to serve on his new Future of Work Commission. And I want to just talk about this for a moment because many of you are certainly having discussions about the future growth of your economy, of your industries, of your workforce, and probably of your respective organizations. And as in getting appointed to this commission, it was really in recognition of the increasing prominence of technology in terms of the work that we do and how so much more technology is driving productivity as compared to human capital. And so really the charge of this commission is not to embrace what many are thinking is the panic of having technology more drive productivity, but really where are those opportunities in terms of embracing these technological innovations? How can we reimagine work? How can we look at allocating work in a more equitable way? And so this also really has a triple bottom line charge with respect to then how do we even look at renegotiating and establishing the social contract with workers in California. You've been hearing a lot about the gig economy and the rising emergence of gig workers by platform-based companies. AB 5, which was a very controversial bill that looked to reclassify workers as employees of these platform companies, very controversial. But this was really, I believe, the beginning of a longer conversation about how we look at job quality. How do we look at work for workers where they are recognized for the value that they bring to their work? How do we look at our educational systems really being able to catch up with respect to those skills that are going to be required for the future workforce? And how do we also then look at the external factors that are going to affect what work looks like in California? And so I will say that when I was at the Middlebury Institute last Friday, when we talk about the promise of establishing a new sector of our economy that is based on preserving the health of our ocean and the blue economy. These are things that we can actually talk about with respect to new opportunities and job creation. And so I'm thrilled that this particular region has so many attributes to offer relative to talking about new opportunities with work. So our urgent policy futures center on wealth and technology and sustainability issues, and those are going to be things that will be front and center with the commission as well. So I want to take just a quick look at the data that the commission was presented with, because it is really what Kate shared with you mirrors what's been happening in the state. From 1978 to 2018, worker productivity grew by 259%, but compensation grew by only 11%. Only the top 10% of workers have seen income growth since 1980. 1/3 of California workers make less than $15 per hour. And of the low-wage workers, 94% are over age 20, 57% are Latinx, and 21% have an associate's or bachelor's degree. So it's not hard to see why California's workforce is facing housing insecurity, wage issues, and uncertainty about their opportunities in the Golden State. And if future wins are to be successful, partnerships are needed at all levels of public and private sectors and across all types of disciplines. For example, the private sector can help inform the public education system of skills necessary for work in the modern economy. This has always been the case, and we're happy about the close relationship that certainly this region has between the private sector and our educational institutions. Government leaders can look for ways to bolster advantages through public, private, and academic partnerships. Human capital is a significant factor for economic growth, and perhaps our tax system can make a pivot and look at how we create incentives for broader human capital development for the needs of our workforce in the future. And a lot of this has to do with how we value work, and this will be a very, very topical issue for the Commission throughout our work. And I bring a unique perspective to the Commission, and that is, what is the role of government long-term in terms of facilitating this shift with what we see happening with work. And so I wanted to just share with you a promising situation, which is getting a little bit of a shout out and lots of attention. And also, I believe the governor will be focusing on in a fairly prominent way. And that is, we have an aging population in California for which we are ill-prepared to address. Now, on the one hand, our aging population is healthier, and so they're living longer, and that's a good thing. But however, that may mean that we will see many older adults in the workforce for longer periods of time. What are those jobs going to look like for our older adult population? And so when we talk about the future of work, we talk about the future of work for all workers. When we look at our older adult population, many are choosing to age in place, want to stay in their own homes, want to stay in their own communities. How do we facilitate that happening? And how do we build that capacity throughout the regions of California for that to happen? What are the attendant needs of our older adult population that could really spur new industries and new entrepreneurship opportunities. So we know very much, we tend to focus on the challenges of aging, and particularly with respect to caregiving needs and care needs. That will have a very prominent place in terms of the work of the commission, and certainly for the governor with his aging task force as well. But when I look at the whole aging issue, to me it is just an uncharted landscape with respect to new opportunities. And I speak to this on this with a little bit of personal experience. I'm currently a part-time caregiver for my 96-year-old mother, who requires 24-hour care because after a viral infection to her brain, her ability to swallow was not restored. So her nutrition, her medication, all through a feeding tube. And she lives in San Francisco. We have been through 4 sets of caregivers to really recognize that we can't find reliability because no one can afford to live in San Francisco and be a caregiver. So I have 4 sisters and 1 brother. We are very lucky. We're a close family. But through the experience of caring for my mother, I will say that this is a wide open field in terms of how we value caregivers. And this is uncompensated care. So as family caregivers, we don't put a value on what that costs. And in fact, there is a cost. It means that we are probably spending less time at work, not being able to be as economically productive. But if we were to ascribe a value to caregiving, and many of our caregivers today are women and tend to be people of color, but if we ascribed a proper value to that work, and particularly embracing technology and all of the things that are being innovated to help with providing better quality of service and hopefully ensuring better quality of life, this is one area that I believe can be a complete game changer in terms of creating economic ladders for so many in California and throughout California if we build that capacity. If more older adults want to live at home, we can think about home modification as another industry that could be very front and center to facilitate aging in place. But I think about this because all of us are affected in some way by this. And whether we're caring for a child, a loved one with disabilities, an aging loved one, this affects every single Californian, and so it's something that we all understand. And I do believe that when we care for our loved ones in that way, what we want for them is to be able to be cared for with dignity. And so, and this is really what I hope we can think about with respect to all work. All work accords dignity. And so when we can think about it that way, I think there are any number of possibilities that can be created relative to our future industries and certainly the future of work. So hand in hand with the discussion on the future of work includes a necessary discussion on climate change. And as I said last week at the Middlebury Institute, we did a lot of work on certainly the role of our oceans. And just on that topic, here in the Monterey Bay, we really are a rich resource with respect to our how we value our ocean resources, our marine resources, how we look at, obviously, tourism being a major factor in terms of the economic growth and vitality here in this region. But beyond tourism, beyond commercial fishing, we're going to need to depend on our oceans for much, much more because of the warming of our planet. We're going to need to depend on our ocean to be really the educational and scientific source of new innovations for protecting our precious resources. We're going to need to look at our oceans as a source of providing energy, whether it's offshore wind or wave energy and the like. And we're going to need to depend on our ocean for increased food supply. And so again, right here in the Monterey Bay, the living laboratory of how we can look at the possibilities for really growing all of those future industries is what we're looking at as it relates to climate change. But regardless of what policy issue I'm involved in, regardless of the work that each of you are doing, I hope you will recognize that the effects of climate change now are very much upon us. And I just want to give a moment of thought to those who are really suffering from the wildfires that are taking place today. This is our new normal in California, and I'm happy to say that Governor Newsom has really invested a lot in shoring up our firefighting and fire protection resources in our state budget, and just can't say enough about our first responders and our firefighting men and women who are on the front lines, really protecting our property and protecting lives. You know, as the state controller, I have the great privilege of serving on the nation's 2 largest public pension funds, and both CalPERS and CalSTRS. And both funds are underfunded. This is my job, is to be sure that they are sustainable, that we are ramping up their growth in terms of the return on investments that we make through those portfolios. I will say that the largest unfunded liability that we have is, yes, our pension liability, unfunded liability, but also our retiree healthcare liability. We are making some progress on that. Governor Brown, before he left office, required that at least with all of our state bargaining units, that every state worker will be pre-funding their retiree health care. So it's not going to be a pay-as-you-go. It won't be a liability that we will carry for 20 to 30 years. We are now pre-funding our retiree health care. And with better plan design, we saw for the first time this last year that our liabilities are actually starting to decrease. And so we plan to do more of that work and in a much focused fashion, particularly as it relates to reducing the cost of healthcare. This is a national issue. It's obviously a focus of the national debate with our presidential candidates, but here in California, we can also lead with respect to how we look at healthcare cost containment and hopefully be able to have those costs be a lesser of a burden for, particularly, as I said, our aging population when they reach retirement. But I speak about the two public pension funds because this is where I really see California's prominence as part of a global economy. When I look to other institutional investors around the world, people are very interested in investing here in California because they know that we are home to technological innovation. They know that we are home to really very top-rated public academic institutions and private academic institutions. We are here home to a diverse population. And people marvel, I have to say, when I travel the world at the diversity of California. And they really embrace it, as I'm sure each of us in this room does, that diversity is our greatest strength and really is the foundation that undergirds our great economic strength. And so I hope we can continue to really value that as a great attribute of California. But with each of our investments, with both pension funds, we've started to integrate much more fully climate and other environmental, social, and governance risks in the investment process, as I said, across all of our asset classes. And this is important because we don't look to pay the benefits to every one of our members tomorrow. We are here for the long term. And so while some of these investments may not be promising in the near term, we know we are going to have an energy transition. We know that California has made a commitment to transition to a low carbon economy by 2045. And we know that, frankly, throughout the world, that the use of fossil fuels will be on the decline. And so we are not in the divestment business. We can't afford to be, and frankly, it's an irresponsible place to be. But we definitely are in the business of looking at where are those investments going to be that will pay off in the future, that will help us really become a sustainable economy, and that also can ensure shared human prosperity. And so we are very, very much focused on that with both public pension funds, at the same time as really developing and adopting risk mitigation strategies so that during the next downturn, we will not see the funds really lose as much ground as we did during the Great Recession. And we're very proud of that work that we've done. So I also sit on the State Lands Commission. I have to tell you that we are so grateful for all of the advocacy that we see from this region in terms of the responsible stewardship of our state lands, our public lands, the commitment to providing access to all of our public lands and to our beaches. And here in California, we only have about another 8.5 miles of beach access that we need to open up to the public, and that is down in Santa Barbara County. But this is really a very underlying doctrine of the public trust doctrine, and that is this is home to every Californian. And I know here in Monterey County, you subscribe to that. It's been a big part of this economy, and why not show the rest of the world how beautiful this region is? And so we're grateful for the advocacy that comes from here. But we have also looked at reducing some of the things that are damaging, frankly, our coastline and some of our public lands, and we were happy to reach an agreement to look at ending the practice of sand mining here in Monterey. And we're very hopeful that this will be something that could be a model for other regions and other parts of the country as well. This was really being watched with great interest with respect to how the Commission would act. So we adopted the first strategic plan at the State Lands Commission when I joined it in January 2015. And right here in Monterey, the State Lands Commission is we're working together with all of you to combat the effects of climate change. Everything from that the warming of our planet will be presenting sea level rise. We are looking at the sea level rise assessments that have been submitted by many of the jurisdictions here in Monterey County, as well as all of our ports here in California. And out of that will come recommendations for how we will look at just building more resiliency, protecting our marine resources, and really having front and center, being sure that we are not adversely affecting our economy here as a result of that. So we find that, and we have examples here. The city of Monterey found that without adaptation and resilience building measures, it could lose more than $545 million in market revenue by 2100. These are the types of assessments we are compelling jurisdictions here to do. And this is important information to have because we know that globally the threat of economic devastation is huge. Coming from sea level rise. So we, again, will not stop innovating. We're not going to stop developing new ideas and understanding the true economic costs and benefits of climate change and seeking ways to reverse some of the more detrimental effects, such as sea level rise. This is, again, another industry that can be developed right here. What are those tools that can help us better understand this phenomenon, and what are the responsible programs to implement that will still ensure that the economy responsibly grows in the context of rising seas. So it's a financial imperative. I don't think you can talk about climate change without talking about certainly the economy and our financial peril that it can pose. I'm going to end with three things that I am going to ask for your help with. And you're asked for a lot of things, but this is actually quite easy because it's about giving money away. Who doesn't want to do that, right? So first of all, many of you know that with our housing crisis, and particularly with many of our seniors who are in their own homes, are facing a much more difficult time paying their property taxes, even if they were a pre-Prop 13 property owner. So we do have the property tax postponement program that is run by my office, along with our county auditors. And this is a program that essentially allows homeowners who meet certain income eligibility requirements to be able to stay in their home, and we will defer their property tax payment. The state will make the payment to the county until such time that the home is either refinanced or changes ownership. And so we have seen really a rise in the subscription to this program, and affordability even affects those who have been in their homes for a long time. So please help us spread the word about that program. We will share information with MBEP when the next cycle starts. But in 2018-19, we paid more than $3.5 million in property taxes to counties to be able to keep people in their own homes. We also have a growth in our California Earned Income Tax Credit Program. The governor tripled the program this year from about a $330 million program to a $1 billion program. Expanded the eligibility so that those who are self-employed and meet certain income eligibility requirements can now be eligible for an earned income tax credit. You don't need to have a filing requirement to claim the credit. It is a refundable credit. We have a very, very significant outreach program that will require each of you to help us spread the word about this program. It is for working households, whether you're an individual member of a household, a sole head of household, or a working family. But if you meet the income eligibility requirements, you can also likely get free assistance with getting that refund back. So we will be getting information out to MBEP about that. But the beauty of this is that it will help families hopefully not have to make such difficult decisions in terms of their daily burdens of living with their families. But also that money goes right back into the local economy. And so I hope that we can count on your support to help us spread the word about that. Growing a program from $330 million to $1 billion mean that to find every eligible claimant will be much harder, much harder. Many of them are in households that frankly don't have anything to do with the tax system, anything to do with government, and so we ask that you just help us try to find who those claimants are and really have them put cash in their pocket that they're entitled to receiving. And then lastly, let me just also ask you, if you don't remember anything I've said today, I'm going to give you a website. Claimit.ca.gov, claimit.ca.gov. I am the holder of over $9 billion in property that does not belong to the state of California, unclaimed property. It could be a savings account you forgot about when you moved. It could be a refund check you didn't cash. It could be contents of a safe deposit box you once owned. It could be stocks and bonds you forgot about. And it could be proceeds from a life insurance policy of a deceased loved one. But this money does not belong to the state of California. Claimit.ca.gov, you can do a search of the public database where we list all of the properties that I and my team are safeguarding in perpetuity. The reason I have those properties is because prior to the law of the unclaimed property in California, companies kept this money for their own profit. And so this is a way for you to please spread the word, search for yourself, your family members, your neighbors, every single name that you've had in your lifetime. And if you are in California, I'm very proud to say this, we led the litigation strategy for really having the life insurance companies to compel them to turn over death benefits. Because the practice from across the industry, from company to company, was that the companies would know that their policyholder had died, but how do we know that our loved one has life insurance coverage? We don't talk about these things. So unless they received a claim, they would continue to pay the premiums on those policies from the cash proceeds that have been accumulated on those policies until such time that those cash proceeds were exhausted, and then would then allow the policy to lapse. So we were able to lead a 12-state litigation strategy to compel these companies to turn over these benefits, and I'm now currently holding over $350 million in death benefits that belong to you and your loved ones. So please, when you search for those benefits, search under the name of your deceased loved one. So let me conclude by saying this. There are many, many thought leaders in this room. I'm looking around the room and I recognize many faces, and this is a room rich with experience, rich with knowledge, rich with innovation, certainly rich with ambition, because you all have a collective, you have a collective, just something that brings you all together, and that is the love for this region, the love for this region. And so I'm encouraged by the unique and diverse solutions that you bring to the table, and this is what this is about when you come here. And as you explore your continuing partnerships and opportunities, I hope your discussions will include all sectors and workforce levels of California's population, but I'm going to dare you to imagine. Dare you to imagine. Pretend you're a child trying to rebuild the economy again, and what you see in front of you, because this is where we are. This is where we are. There's nothing that we can't imagine that can't come true here in our great state of California. And I've traveled this state extensively, and I've often said, and I think Kate will agree with me, that there's no challenge in California that can't be solved by those of us right here in California. And I truly believe that. So I look forward to hearing more about the dynamic ideas that come out of the Monterey Bay region. We have been very grateful for the partnership that we've had with you on so many fronts, particularly about protecting our precious environment and coastal resources. And with that, let me just say congratulations to MBEP. Congratulations to Kate and her leadership here. We are thrilled that the Economic Summit is coming here next year. And this is really a testament to all of you, because you embody what I believe are the values of California that is really recognized, like I said, not just around the nation, but around the world. And let us be grateful that every single day here in California, we get to wake up to a place where we embrace diversity as our greatest strength and not a threat. Thank you all very much for being here.